Hi everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
Hey everyone, it's Wendy K Laidlaw here, and as always, I hope that this podcast finds you well. I'm really, really pleased to be interviewing my next guest, which is Dr. Kim Jobst. He is a very eminent doctor in his field. He trained as a medical doctor. He's also a metaphysician as well, fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and a member of the Faculty of Homeopathy. As well as being asked by the Dalai Lama to speak on certain subjects, and also was asked by the Clinton administration in the White House in the late 1990s to publish a paper called Diseases of Meaning. Now, when I first started speaking with Dr. Kim, I was just so impressed at his wide range of knowledge, his expansion of understanding of what it means to be a human in this day and age, not only from the physical sense, but literally down to a cellular perspective. But he also understands that certain disease can show up when there's things that are, as we say in Scotland, awry, things that are not settled or sitting well within us, deep down within our subconscious. Maybe things that happened in childhood. Perhaps there's been, bereavements, or there's been loss, or there's been mistreatment or whatever, and it's deep down embedded in our subconscious. So I really hope that you enjoy this interview. It's always, we can spend hours talking about this particular subject, and I hope that at least it kind of provides some context and some further depth of information and knowledge about what might be happening in your body if you're not getting the healing that you seek. That endometriosis, as you know by now, is a very complex condition and requires a multimodal approach to get to the root cause of what's preventing healing. As you know, healing is a natural process, an innate process that happens all by itself. And the aim of putting the condition into remission is identifying what might be stopping that process. So make sure you schedule some time out here, sit back, enjoy and relax, take notes, because there's some phenomenal information that he shares. And as I say, I'd love to hear from you if there's anything that is enlightened from you from this podcast. And I will look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, to your health. Hey everyone, it's Wendy K Laidlaw here from Heal Endometriosis Naturally, and I am so super excited for you to hear my next fabulous guest, which is Dr. Kim Jobst from the UK, and I'm going to give you a bit more intro about him in a second, but it's so wonderful to have you here, Kim.
Wendy, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Well, we absolutely we're very aligned with our thinking, and you will hear more about how aligned we are in a second, but let me just give you a bit of background to this amazing, eminent man. His name is Dr. Kim Jobst, and he's an award-winning metaphysician, I'll put my teeth back in, a consultant in integrative medicine, and dedicated to integration in science, healing, and holistic healthcare. He's an alchemist. His alchemist mission is to establish and use the science of meaning to serve as a healer of peoples and nations. He began his training in agricultural sciences and forestry at Oxford University, transitioning into physiological sciences and medicine at Oxford, St Thomas's Hospital, and Glasgow universities, gaining specialist qualifications in internal medicine, neurodegeneration and dementia, homeopathic medicine, having earlier gained distinctions in traditional Chinese acupuncture and Jungian analytical psychology. Dr. Jobst has studied with Dr. Stevens, Dr. Epstein, Tony Robbins, Michael Harris, and a whole list of other people, which has helped him to incorporate all of his work that he's been learning. He's a founding editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, research on paradigm, practice, and policy, and was visiting professor in healthcare and integrated medicine in Oxford. Dr. Jobst was invited by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to discuss global health and mental well-being for mankind in 1991, and in 2013 was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his services to integrative medicine and Nobel laureate Archibald Desmond Tutu. As a clinical director of Oxford project to investigate memory and aging, called Optima, he and his colleagues led internationally recognized collaborative research into the brain aging, neurodegeneration, and the dementias, developing strategies for diagnosis and treatment and uncovering key nutritional health factors. Now, Dr. Jobst co-directs his own practice called Functional Shift Consulting, a healthcare consultancy in London. He's a founding member of the National Care Farm Initiative in the UK, and also finds time to serve on a number of scientific advisory boards. I don't know where you find the time, for emerging energy medicine technologies in the USA and in India, particularly with the Sukhya International Holistic Health and Healing Initiative in Bangalore, India, and with the College of Medicine in the UK. Dr. Jobst has 4 children, lives in London, and loves connecting deeply with people and nature, traveling and teaching all over the world. And I do want to add here, he was also invited by the Clinton administration to the White House in the late 1990s to write a paper called Disease of Meaning, which we will just come back to now. But wow, what an introduction.
Yeah, I'd quite like to meet that man. That was interesting. You better introduce me one of these days.
What's that?
You better introduce me one of these days.
What's that like, hearing all that back?
It's quite disarming, actually.
But it sounds like a man that's just hungry for knowledge and information, which I just love.
That's true. This is a man who was hungry to find out why.
Yeah.
And who's still hungry to find out why.
Exactly. And I love that about you. And I know we've still got the summit to come up and people will hear more about you, but perhaps you could give us a brief overview of where that why and hunger came from.
Well, the simplest answer is that why came from God. But because I was born with it, it's been in me from when I can first remember things. I had a fascination with insects and animal life. I was born in Africa, and I was brought up in those very early years in amazing countryside under extraordinary conditions and exposed to wonderful wildlife and to nature, and then came to London when I was 6, and in that incredible winter of 1962 when everything froze. And that was a real shock. And I think it's been a journey through my own health challenges, which have raised questions, obviously. When I was little, I witnessed my mother very ill with double pneumonia, what we called double pneumonia in those days, and choosing to be treated homeopathically. And I was in the room when the GP said to her, and these are words that are kind of burned in my brain, "You are a very stupid woman, Mrs. Jobst.
Wow.
You may leave your children without a mother."
Wow.
And she was very clear. And I have a very vivid recollection of her sitting up in bed at the time. And 3 days later, she was over it with these tiny little granules. And what really made the impression on me was, first of all, the kind of draconian, the extraordinary way that she was spoken to. Even then, her clarity and certainty, and that made a real impression. And then the mystery of whatever it was that happened in between. And subsequent to that, when I became ill, we'd come from Africa to London. I developed asthma. I was one of the first kids that was given Ventolin, which was an amazing experience when one can't, is really critically compromised.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I found myself in the hands of a Japanese monk who had brought macrobiotics to London. Before you could get brown rice in any supermarket, there was only one place in London where you could get those kinds of foods, on the Portobello Road. And he put me on a macrobiotic diet. And I remember so well his taking my pulses and looking at my tongue, and that experience. I was 14. I knew that he knew aspects of me better than I knew myself, that he did this in a way that was completely different to anything I'd ever encountered. And a month later, not having been able to run the length of a rugger field, I was running 7 miles, and not long after that, the third fastest in the school, even with the 18-year-olds. So something really radical happened.
Yeah.
And that made a very, very big impression, and I wanted to know more. So, I mean, it just kind of grew from there. And there were other things that happened because I had a back injury. I was part of the England youth rowing squad and training with the big boys, and had a back injury. I was told by the orthopedic surgeons that I would need spinal fusion and I would probably be a cripple by the time I was 21. And then found myself in the hands of an osteopathic physician who referred me on to an Alexander teacher. And I was with those who had actually trained with Alexander. And during that process, had a life-changing experience of both the distinction between my body and my mind, my life force, and their inseparable unity. And that moment led to a complete transformation in the way that I was functioning. And it was really then that somehow working with that was what I wanted to do. Although at the time I wanted to be an actor, very much. An actor and a musician. But I really, by the time I'd finished A-levels, I did not want to do any more study. I did not want to commit to a 7-year course. I knew that. And I knew that I wanted to work with my father, that, who was an agricultural scientist and responsible for some really quite profound innovations in animal husbandry in the UK and beef production. But it was when I'm pursuing that, I went to the States to work on ranches, and I was working with some cowboys who were training me to lasso and roll a cigarette with one hand on horseback.
As you do.
As one does. I never mastered that.
There's still time.
There's still time. It's quite true. There's time to do that and to learn to surf. That's what I want. But it was there that it was in under those circumstances that I had a kind of Damascus experience, which was because I was already then was this question of what is a human being? How does a human being function? Why do they get sick? And what do you do about it?
Yeah.
And which fundamentally is, what is the meaning of life and how does it work?
Yeah.
And I had this experience, which was, if you want to know the answer to that, you, Kim, then you need to go and do medicine. And it was so powerful that I literally turned my horse around, and the next day I was on my way back to the UK. That's
amazing. A very clear direction, isn't it? When you're asking all these questions, and it's funny, isn't it? When you do ask those questions, you can just suddenly get that one word, a 2-word answer. It's just so clear. You can't deny it.
You can't. No. You can't. And it's it's wonderful, actually.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there you were at 6 and at 14 having those physical ailments and illnesses and experiences. And obviously watching your mom as well must have been very profound. And there you are on horseback in America, and then you turn around and you come back and you study medicine. So I know the story, but I think the woman with endometriosis would love to hear this story. So there you are, aligned using the Alexander techniques. You're suddenly really aware of the brain-body connection, the life force. This is not weird, wacky, or woo-woo. This is like a real connection. to you, to yourself as your whole. So what was it like then, going into that educational establishment with those feelings and seeing these, having had those experiences that you had?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, I was very blessed, Wendy, because at the very outset, I had initially been invited to an interview in Cambridge, and I was wanting to do, forestry and agricultural sciences, animal husbandry there, when they still had that course. And the guy who interviewed me said, "I think you should be doing medicine." So something was apparent even then. And I said, no, I really know that I don't want to do medicine. I don't want to take a place from somebody who knows that that's what they want to do. And so he said, "Come and be a vet." And I definitely knew I didn't want to do veterinary science. So I went to Oxford to do agricultural sciences and forestry. Having been offered a place in both, which is pretty extraordinary. And I didn't know that at the time. I just was following. And this is the important thing, I think, is that even in the depths of despair and in the depths of illness, there is a voice that calls, that guides, that leads. But what happens in the noise of everything is that gets drowned out. So I followed that. Now, in that first year, having said I want to do medicine, they laughed at me. It was like, who do you think you are, trying to get in through the back door? I had no interest in getting through the back door. For me, it was so clear, this is what I had to do, and that they would understand that. They didn't. And that was quite a journey. But it meant that, first of all, I was not given a place in Oxford, and I was going to go to the London Hospital and medical school in London instead, and to leave. And that meant that I then had a whole part of my first year in Oxford where I was no longer part of a degree course, and I could design my own curriculum. And so I chose to work with certain people. One was in biophysics, which I didn't know anything about, and I wanted to know something about, and I'd been really inspired by someone who taught. And the other was in the neurosciences by David Smith, Professor David Smith, who was the professor of pharmacology, and utterly inspiring. And I had the freedom. I wasn't having to prepare for any more exams. I had a place to go in London. And so I was, again, this is important, I was pursuing something that was of innate interest.
Yeah.
And with both those people, I had some epiphanies. The epiphany with David Smith is still with me. And it was something to do with the mystery of how the life force itself is made manifest through behaviors and the central nervous system, and that its central importance.
Yeah.
And the other was that everything is frequency. I remember saying to Brian Copson, so what you're basically saying to me is that we could, if we had the right receptors, see sound and hear light. And it was fascinating. He said to me, I've never thought of it that way, but I think you're right. Now, those revelations, they're little seeds and they grow. And pursuing that ultimately led one way and another through other circumstances that actually I was offered a place in Oxford in the end. That's a whole story in its own right. And so I began to study. And, when the voice within is louder and clearer and stronger than everything else on the outside, a way is found.
Yeah. I mean, I love hearing that, you really been aware of that voice quite early on. When did you first become aware of that voice, and what do you think drowns it out?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I'm going to say something really quite controversial now.
Good. Good.
And that is that I was aware of that voice before I could ever speak. I was aware of that voice when I was a baby. I was aware of that voice when I was being born, because my birth was traumatic and wasn't easy. And I was aware at a certain moment of a 36-hour labor that my life was in danger.
Yeah.
And something spoke at that moment, and there was a connection that was made. So I truly believe that voice is innate. Now, why does it get, and then the story that I shared with you when I was 3 years old with my father in the peach tree, and the of picking that unripe peach and not being able to put it back, and experiencing through him, through his presence and his wisdom, something to do with time. And process. And also, of course, deep, deep love, because he didn't punish me.
Yeah. Which is pretty rare in itself, isn't it? You know,
it was amazing.
Very, very rare. There would have been punishment galore for daring to pick a fruit.
There were only 3 peaches on that tree. It was in its first year of existence. I mean, this was a whole story in its own right. And of course, I have a relationship with peaches for the rest of my life. Always, the first peach of the season is always an important moment for me.
That's lovely. That's so nice.
And it gave me a lot. But what I want, I mean, why do we lose it? How do we lose it? It's drowned out by everybody else's expectations, by societal demands, by paradigms that other people follow.
But do you think it's as well because like we don't talk about it as a society anymore? I think if there'll be some people listening to this and going, you know, what are you talking about? And although to be fair, I think most of the women with endometriosis, they are acutely sensitive. We call them EHIS, exquisitely highly intuitive sensitive people, women with endometriosis, because they just have this higher level of sensitivity. And I just wonder if, you know, that they probably always have had that connection, that knowing that that's something, but thought themselves crazy, or maybe they thought they were imagining it, or maybe it was dismissed as silly or frivolous by the people around them. I feel like with you, it's like it wasn't the case. It was just an acceptance of that was the fact of part of who you were.
So let me just say, I lost you for a bit there.
All right.
You were completely frozen and all sound went. So I'm just going to pick up. What are you saying? Let me just rephrase. Are you saying that for many people that gets drowned out for all kinds of reasons, but somehow in me it didn't? Yeah. Wendy, I'm no different to anybody else. And the journey to the authentic self has been, in my experience, a long one. And actually, in those early years, the clarity and the energy and the focus that could take me into medicine got me there.
Yeah. And
then once one's in it, there was a long desert period, the 40 days and 40 nights. I've done my time. And in that time, there is no question that I lost my way. But part of what we're going to talk about, I think, is that the great discovery for me of all of it, the 2 really important things. The first is that we are never not on our way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what is happening. It doesn't matter how awful it is, how awful it feels, how dramatic it is. You're still on your way, the first thing. And we'll pick that out a bit more. That's the meaning piece.
Yeah.
And the second part is that the universe has always got our back. Now, it's taken me decades to really know that. No matter what, no matter how, and it's been tough.
Yeah.
And really through that passage, and I say this I really would love people to get this and to understand this. And I say this after a lifetime in medicine, in science, passionately interested in what a human being is and in healing, that there is a reason.
Yeah.
There really, really, really is a reason.
But I think a lot of people, like, I think that whole reason and connection is lost in our society. So when people start talking about that, they might feel like, well, give me something tangible. But from your own experience, you were able to, there wasn't so much noise that you were actually able to hear it. And obviously I hear you might have lost your way at times, but you always managed to find your way back to that. So for the women that are ill right now in bed or cramping or all sorts of pain and endometriosis, it might be an intangible concept for them. So how would you suggest that they even open their mind to that concept? I mean, I love that you come from the experience that you do, because you've come down the main conventional medical route of training in biology and physics and science and stuff. So, and that excites me beyond belief, because you get the whole thing. I mean, I think you told me before how middle of your training, you would doctoral training, you would go jump on a train and go and train in
No, that I was going to say to you that I knew that there is another way. I had experienced acupuncture, I'd experienced homeopathy, I'd experienced macrobiotics, I'd experienced osteopathy, I'd experienced the Alexander technique, I'd experienced music and sound and movement already. And I was blessed to grow up in an environment where I was exposed to many, many different influences.
Yeah.
But I knew that was the way. I knew there was another way. But the voice said, you need to go and do medicine, because you need to be able to speak both languages. There has to be a bridge, what you and I refer to as the rainbow bridge between the worlds, because they're actually all in the same world. And what became clearer and clearer to me is there has to be a unifying underpinning science that is applicable to everything. It is not possible to have something like acupuncture that works, that delivers results, for example, and a biochemical science of some form or another, or gene therapy that works, for them not to be obeying the same laws. And that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And I pursued, in a sense, a double life for years in that sense. Now, for your woman who's cramping and in pain and feeling like death warmed up and just wants to die, and I'm not a woman, but I've had my own suffering. I have yet to meet anyone who has come into my arena for care, investigation, advice, or discussion, who, when given the space and the attention, doesn't know.
Yeah.
The key is non-judgmental space and attention. And you're somebody who's been through the whole thing. Somewhere inside yourself, you knew. And we fight. We fight because it doesn't fit. It means that our marriage may be on the line. It means that our relationships are on the line. It means the job may not be right. We know it.
Yeah. But we don't want to see it. We don't want to accept it. Yeah.
Yeah. And because the fear of saying, oh my God, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
But
so that fear of failure to some degree, isn't it? It's just like, I can't accept defeat. I can't acknowledge failure because it reflects badly on you. But actually, and I think that's where the tension comes from, isn't it? It's just that fight internally of, intuitively, that voice in the back of your head that's trying to get louder, trying to speak to you, then shows up in your body in some way of dis-ease and disharmony.
Exactly. So it all, I mean, we see examples of it everywhere in life. If two things are rubbing together and they're supposed to have a fluid in between them to make it work, but you don't maintain the fluid, what happens? They wear themselves out. The machine breaks down. The machine breaks down. It's giving you feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that's really one of the most important things, is that in our body is exactly the same. And what that led me to, and that happened really quite early on, was the absolute certainty that life has meaning. Even if you say, I'm an atheist, I don't think life has any meaning. There isn't, there's nothing like that. Actually, not even that position has meaning, because it means that it impacts your life and the way you live it and all the relationships that you have.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter how far you go. It doesn't matter how you look. You will find the same thing. If we work from a scientific paradigm, it has meaning. It works. Every single formula, every single interpretation that we give to numbers, every single perspective that we have comes from the perspective of meaning.
Yeah.
In fact, it is the ultimate catalyst hidden in plain sight.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because Viktor Frankl, who was, you know, a psychologist,
My hero.
Oh, he's amazing. I'm reading his other book called The Will to Meaning, which is literally exploding my brain at the moment as we speak. But he says in his book, you know, Man's Search for Meaning, when he was a psychologist and had gone through many concentration camps, as you know, he said, you know, I think you can take away, hope can be taken away from people, but meaning can't. And this is very, very like real for women with endometriosis. They've had their hopes raised and dashed so many times, they end up giving up hope. You know, hope is then put into the hands of a surgeon or to a doctor or whatever procedure. And then that can be taken away and dashed. And it gets to the point, I think, with a lot of women that I work with, or when they come to reach out to me, they've given up hope and I'm their last hope type thing. But what I invariably try to do is give them meaning behind why this disease and has turned up in their body, trying to really search under and behind and underneath, you know, and unearth and excavate what is really going on inside. Because I think, but why do you think, I mean, because it makes so much sense. It's so much common sense. Of course, there's meaning behind its cause and effect, isn't it? That goes back to the basics laws of Newton, isn't it? You know, so why do you think that has been so overshadowed? You know, I mean, I know the answer, but I'd love to hear your answer. You know, I know for myself, like, but why? It seems because it adds so much more dimension and depth to us as humans and as a society, that why isn't that discussed more, do you think? Especially in the medical field.
I know you're not one for small questions, are you?
Sorry, I should have sent them to you ahead of us speaking.
No, it's fine. It's where to start, because.
But I mean, even just from your heart perspective first, and then go into another realm. But because you and I have talked at length, every time we speak, you know, we could speak for hours, days, weeks, months, and years about the subject that we're incredibly passionate about, because we've had some really challenging times in our lives. But what got us through, like with Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp, which is what he observed, was the people that found meaning in their existence, even the most dire, desperate and disastrous and destructive environment they found themselves in, they were able to try and find a sense of humor.
Those were the ones who survived. And it's crucial. It's absolutely critical in his work. Exactly. And I've actually, dare I say it, I want to take it one step further. And I'm upset that he's died. He was a man I really wanted to meet. He had a massive impact on my life at a very important stage in my life as a physician. And what he found was that it was not the biggest, it was not the strongest, it was not the cleverest. It was those who could find meaning. Now, because that gave them a will to live. And I have seen this again and again and again and again, which is not to say that dying is wrong or a failure.
No, absolutely not.
Because sometimes the revelation is such that people actually, with all their being, want to go. They're done. They've had it. They just want to recycle. When I say I want to take it a step further, the step further, Viktor Frankl says that man finds meaning. My experience, my work, my research has shown me that meaning is inherent.
I believe you.
And so part of the reason that we are in the situation that we are, you asked the question about the profession, and it's not just the medical profession, my God.
Wow.
You know, there are as many rabid people in the so-called alternative medical world.
Absolutely.
Who are as rigid to their paradigm as anybody else.
Absolutely.
You know, inculcates guilt in people. Is that the step further, this inherent meaning, it's inherent to life itself, is that whatever it is that is happening as feedback in order to get us to be able to wake up and to see more deeply.
Yeah.
Now, what is so interesting, you know, you can go to Louise Hay's book, you can go to other people's book about meaning, dictionaries, you know, they may help, but my own work has shown me, beyond any doubt for me now, that meaning is unique to each person.
Absolutely.
So you and I can line up a dozen people who've got endometriosis, and each of them can talk about their experience, and they may share a whole host of symptoms.
Yeah.
But when we actually can create a space in which they can listen, the meaning for each of those 12 people will be completely different.
Absolutely.
And that's miraculous.
And that's the revelation, and that's where the tension. If you look at Dr. John Sarno, when he talks about tension myositis and how that tension or friction causes a restriction of blood supply and oxygen to the body and all that kind of stuff, that's where it starts to get super exciting, doesn't it? So exactly, each person's meaning is unique to them, and I think I just think it's such a shame where we're at, and maybe we're about to shift again. Maybe we're about to cause enough of a ripple again to get people just to, as you say, to wake up. I call it being aware and awake, because sometimes we sleepwalk through certain situations, relationships, jobs, because we've been conditioned, put upon us as that we have to be a good girl or a good boy, and we have to do this thing because that's what, and we don't think to question. I was having a conversation with my son yesterday, and don't get me wrong, it annoyed me at times whilst he was growing up, but I always encourage my children to ask why. You know, don't just accept, you know, rules are there as guidelines, you know, suggest, you know, that the systems are there as guidelines, but always to question, come back to yourself and question, is this right for me? How does this work for me? Why is this happening for me? Because it's the questions we ask ourselves that I think can help direct us and, of course, open us up.
Yeah. Right? Now, I'm gonna can I just ask you something? I'm going to come straight back to this. Yeah. But we will at some point probably touch on some of the physical issues like food that are important. I'm coming back to the why in a minute, but the reason I'm raising it right now is that I have been cooking something that's important and I forgot to turn it off. I can just get up and turn it off, otherwise everything's going to burn while we're talking.
Of course, yes, I'll just, yeah, no problem at all.
Just one sec.
And we are back.
Okay, so look, let me just come back, because you asked me why this happens in the profession. I grew up with it as a medical student. You know, I would slip out on a Wednesday and I would go to the acupuncture clinic. It really makes me feel quite emotional even now. And I would see amazing things happen, and I would participate, and I was learning to treat, and I was working with such an extraordinary human being. And then I'd come back and I would see people with side effects, having problems. And this is a strong thing I'm going to say, but I'm certain their lives shortened by what we were doing, especially with chemotherapy at the time. But we didn't know anything better. Now, what I found as I just stayed with it was that I was working with people who were not malicious.
No.
That was not their intention. They were doing everything that they could with the best of their ability. The paradigm, you know, the notion of a magic bullet was real.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes along and says, you know what, you can take pulses in a different way. And if you learn to take those pulses like the ancient Chinese did, you can find out what's going on in the organ systems.
Yeah.
And then you can use these little needles and you can put them in these points where there doesn't seem to be anything to show except you can feel them, and amazing things happen and people get better. You've just spent 7 years training to be a doctor. Then you've gone through all the junior years and then all your stuff as a junior doctor. And you've had to go through all the other exams, and you finally make it. And some little fart comes along and says, there's another way.
You're going to ignore it.
Yeah, your entire life, you don't just ignore it. And for some people, the impulse to heal is so great, they will open to anything because that's their primary concern.
Yeah. For
others, the threat, and I know it, I've experienced it, I've done all this work, and you're telling me it doesn't work. Oh my God. Now that's understandable, and that happens in all our lives.
Well,
There will
it's
be
funny you say
areas.
that. Yeah, because I say that as well. I say that I don't think people join the profession in any other way than they want to heal, but I think they're trained and conditioned as part of the system that they're in. And as you say, it's a very valid point. They get to the point, and I think what I always like to believe is that after all their training, if they recognize and become awake themselves to what isn't working, then they have a duty at least to expand. And that's why I love like people like yourself and Dr. Myhill and Dr. Sarno and these doctors who have had their main training, but also remained kind of like, ooh, so that's not working, or that's making my client worse. So therefore, what can we do? And you're right. I think, there's people on the other extreme as well, which, alternative health, and if you like, in inverted commas, who are very rigid and stuck in their way. And I think what we're saying is it's remaining fluid. I mean, I know we talk about this out with, it's like the more I read, the more I realize I don't know, and I want to get in the know. And there's so many phenomenal factors within the body that we still are discovering. You talk about measuring of vibration, measuring of light. I mean, now that the technology has caught up with our curiosity, if you like, we really can put extra meaning into what is happening within the body. And I think it's a shame, it's such a shame that there's not more kind of making it okay that the brain body connection is a very physical one. It's a biology one. It's a physiological one that the mainstream medicine cuts it off or compartmentalizes different body parts as if they are separate, like from a mechanical perspective from the others.
Yes. I mean, it's a worldview. It's what we call a paradigm. It's not, what we're talking about is not new.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that.
Exactly.
As we go back into history and into the ancients, there are metaphysical truths and there are physiological truths that are there and that were known. Now, I want to bring them both together because, you're 17, 18 years old, and you're riding a horse and you have this kind of experience, and it's saying, you've got to go and learn both languages. That's quite a long journey, and it's not a journey I particularly want to take. Now I understand why.
Yeah.
Because one of the great influences of my life was Jiddu Krishnamurti, who, as a child, I was incredibly privileged to be able to sit with and to listen to in the flesh. And what the quintessence of what I took away from him were two things. One, the speaker is not the body. The speaker is not what's important, it's the message, number one. Number two, follow the question. Follow the question that arises in you all the way, no matter how far it takes you. Now, when you do that, if you take the scientific paradigm, it takes you into physics and mathematics. And we go into the particle and to the subatomic particles, and we come to that extraordinary phenomenon that the particle and the wave are one and the same thing. It depends on how you look at them and the circumstances in which you look at them. You come to what is energy? Where does it come from? Yeah. These are questions that are fundamental to every scientist who's really, really asking the questions. You come to people like Richard Feynman, Nobel laureates who live in that space. Yeah. They're not uncomfortable with it, and they're aware that chaos, what we think is chaos, is not chaos, that there is an order.
That's right.
We go the other way to the metaphysics, and we ask the question, where do I come from and why does it exist? And you learn to pay attention and to meditate, for example, or to move, to do yoga, to do it doesn't matter what it is. If the question is real, you come to the same thing. They meet in that fundamental question of where do I come from? What is it about? Who am I? Now, for every human, in every human for whom that is a real question, they will be guided. They will come to that moment of experience, which I know you've had, as I have had. Yeah. It doesn't stop.
No.
And every moment of realization, which is a blessing, gives rise to the next challenge, whatever that challenge is going to be. For those women who have endometriosis, what is really important, and it's just one of many conditions, is that the physiology is inextricably linked to your life force for a reason, that the symptoms, and they will be unique to you. That's key, in my opinion. We can use nutrition. We can use homeopathy. We can use different ways of working with it, which I know you do, and that will help to change the physiology. But the real deep healing happens when you get to the emotions, you work with the emotions, you go deeper through the emotions, which is again what you're doing, and you bring them to, why am I here? Yeah. What is this about? Now, what I have found in my work, which is now really dedicated to that component, is that each and every human being has purpose.
Absolutely.
And that purpose is unique to them. That doesn't mean they have to be a Steve Jobs creating, you know, an Apple and global impact, because actually it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, you have a global impact anyway, if you really understand the physics.
Yeah.
And that's a sacred, that's really a sacred process. But what I have found over the years, and you know, it's now over 35 years, is that when that emerges, physiology changes.
Yeah.
Life changes.
And it's a really real thing, isn't it? And I'm sure there's some women listening to this and going, but I don't know what my purpose is, and I don't know why I've got endometriosis. And this is where it's almost sort of, I used to use the phrase, let go and let God, or let go and you'll know. And it is kind of like, as you said right at the beginning, there's probably something that they're hanging on to, or there's some past, or there's some current situation that there's causing some friction there that is below the level of consciousness.
Yes.
And that's for me why I think the tools that are really supportive of what you're saying to shine light on what the purpose is are like the journaling and meditation and things like that, because they really allow you to tap into yourself and really tune into yourself. Because it's so funny when you said you had that voice when you're out with the cowboys and you had that clear voice. I always remember, it's not a particularly pleasant scene in my head, but again, seared into my brain when my mother she was a very toxic person, but she was literally sitting on this place and she was berating me, had sort of torn shreds off me for about 3 hours. And there was this voice at the back of my head that said, don't switch off, Wendy, because it'll go straight into your subconscious. Now, I was 14, 15 at the time. I'd never read anything. There was no internet in those days. And it was a very clear, don't switch off, it'll go straight into your subconscious. And it stuck with me, you know, to stay that awake, stay aware. And I think that's what we're both saying, isn't it?
It's very much what we're saying. It's very interesting that you had that, you're 15. It's very similar to, I was 14 when that first experience of encountering a different force, a different way, a different perspective. Now, you know, in my journey, there was a moment when I was building the research team and the research project with David in Oxford, and I was struggling in a number of areas of my personal life, and there was a moment when I knew I needed help. And I went to get that help. And that help for me took me out with my upbringing, where psychotherapy or any of those approaches was very much frowned upon. And I was incredibly fortunate, blessed, guided, and ended up in the hands of Anthony Stevens, who's, you know, without doubt, one of the finest Jungian analysts of our time, written beautifully. And I had this experience, and I bring it up because that experience of don't switch off, because it may get locked in the unconscious, brought me into the world of Jung, the world of myth, the world of image, the world of story, which of course is a manifestation and function of meaning.
Yeah.
And we come into primeval symbols that have been with us and exist in every single culture. And they exist in every single culture for a reason.
Yeah.
There is a reason that the womb has a particular significance. You know, it's a sacred vessel in which
a life-giving
conception
vessel.
takes
Yeah.
place. Exactly.
Yeah.
It incubates life.
I know.
And what for me was so extraordinary was how is it that we've lost that sense? Now, what is really interesting is that what has happened in that path, gosh, I don't think weave all of this in, because the first was, there is no doubting that technology is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And everything has two sides.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that it seems to be that humanity, has this endemic hubris which fails to recognize, or has periods when it forgets, that we are here because of it.
Yeah.
You could argue that you create yourself, but actually it's not you creating yourself. It creates itself. It is you. Mm-hmm. Now, I know this is getting pretty mystical, but actually when we're getting into the healing of somebody and wanting to connect with their innate ability. So that's what led me to it. My question was, it doesn't make sense to me. Evolution has happened. We've gone through billions of years to get here. Sorry.
Yeah. No, sorry for interrupting. Just when you said the word innate, my son was writing an essay about, innate tool behavior of animals, and is it nature or innate? Did they learn from social conditioning, or is it an innate quality? I believe we're born with a particular purpose, like we have our own unique fingerprint. I think that innate ability to manifest, but we don't know that is even possible until someone even suggests it to us. And of course, depending on our conditioning and our family of origin and things like that, and our schooling, and what's been projected onto us, I think from my own experience, I've totally transformed my life because I have broken free from those psychological chains, these invisible chains that were there that I didn't even know they were there, to break free, to step into who I was meant to be.
Now, that's absolutely right. Now, where this gets critical is that you wouldn't even have asked the question. I mean, this is arguable, but the symptoms were what made you search.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was searching since the age of about 19. I got engaged at 19. I was married at 21. And I remember standing exactly where I was, particularly in a point in my sitting room, and just had this kind of like, I was searching, I just had this hungry search all the time. And I realized at that moment that what I was searching for was me.
Yes, exactly.
And then I was like, okay, so who am I? What do I think? What do I feel? Because I didn't know who I was. And that was when I was 20. But then clearly then other things get in the way. As you say, the noise, the voice gets drowned out. The noise that's out there, you again lose yourself. And it took for me, sadly, to get to that desperate state, to really re-examine and think and feel who I was at my core. And I think I have this theory that, we are all born as very vulnerable little babies with this unique spirit, this unique energy. And it's an innocence, isn't it? And depending on the environment that it grows up in, it's either nurtured or it has to stay hidden. It has to, be protected. And all those layers of protection come up and above it to protect the core of who you are.
Yes.
And that's ultimately for me, what that was the meaning behind my disease, was I had created all those layers, superficial layers, that weren't nurturing my soul, weren't nurturing my spirit. And I'm quite a practical sort of classic Scottish woman that, I'm not into woo-woo or things like that, but I could feel my spirit waning. I could feel my soul, with being vampirized. I could, and I didn't know what it was until the disease finally kind of reared its ugly head and hit me like a truck, to have to examine all those things and become comfortable with them, accept them for what they were.
Absolutely. Now, my question to you, if you bring back yourself at 2021, and we put her here, and we bring up the moment of your realization in the depths of your dis-ease, which of those could actually take all that information?
Yeah, exactly.
Had the strength, had the vessel in, you get? So
Absolutely.
yes, we were searching.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But
I think it goes back to what Viktor Frankl was saying about, you know, the will. I had the will at 20, but I didn't have the capacity to deal with the knowledge that that meant to fulfill the will, if that makes any sense.
You didn't have the knowledge or the material.
Exactly. Or the capacity to find the meaning. I can't, there was something always there, but to take its full form, like we've talked before, like we know we're here now because we're meant to be, and it was a struggle. It was hard, but I wouldn't change a single thing, because part of the journey has provided the context and further meaning and education to allow us to be here, to have earned this place, if you like.
It's provided you with the context and the content.
Exactly.
Now, your unique path at the moment is in the area of specialism that you have, which you have enlarged and will continue. That is the case, in my perception, for every human being.
Absolutely.
And that may be in a professional capacity to go out and touch the lives of millions of people as you do. That may be to raise a small family and tend the backyard.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what that is going to lead to. Nobody knew that that orphan was going to go on and create a multinational company that was going to change the world with a computer.
Absolutely.
But somebody had to live the life they lived. And
also put the seeds of potential in there, and just to see what was possible. I've got a friend of a friend who's wanting to start the most beautiful project. She's in New Zealand. She's wanting to start this project of helping, you know, orphan children or children that are homeless, and really help them, you know, go around with a big van and educate them and inspire them. And you know, and I just think it's marvelous that she wants to do that, to help guide people who society have perhaps rejected or don't know about. And exactly, who knows what someone is capable of. You know, if you'd said to me 6 years ago that I would be here now speaking to you, I said never in a million years. But the fact that context, I had to go through that journey. I had to experience all that. I almost had to, I don't know if they call it a rebirth perhaps, but people talk about having lost everything of what they thought was something, to then actually come back up from the ashes into something that is so meant to be. Like, I'm sure with your own work, like, you know, you're here, you're meant to be here right now.
I do.
And you've only just begun, haven't you? Because there's so much waiting to happen for you.
There have been a number of iterations. And I think the thing that I wanted to come to is that it doesn't need any kind of ordinary small r religious formulation. Because if one really follows the question, if you really follow what it is that is guiding, calling, you come inevitably to the realization that there is an intelligence that runs everything, that is everything. Words become really significant here.
Absolutely.
And when I talk about God, or I say the universe, I'm not seeking to externalize some kind of entity. I'm actually referring to a force, to something that exists, an order, an intelligence. As we follow it, we realize that every single thing obeys certain universal laws. You know, there is a law of polarity. If we don't balance, if we don't maintain balance, if we don't see that actually in every single situation there is balance, we go into your own life and my own life, the stresses and strains that there have been, the traumas, the challenges. If we really look, if we really follow, we will see that there is always balance, even though that may be traumatic. Now, it is the trauma that creates the friction, that is the energy that allows the perception to evolve, that changes and allows one then to expand one's vision. And that, I call that a sacred process, which is why disease is a sacred thing, which is why disease, this whole thing about diseases of meaning, actually it goes further, because my thesis, what I've said and written about, is that disease is health. If you had not got endometriosis, you would not be where you are right now. You would not be who you are right now. You would not be living on purpose.
Absolutely.
You would have gone on in a lackluster, unhappy relationship, doing what you were doing in an unhappy job, whatever it might have been. And to see, therefore, that the symptoms are feedback. This is healthy. It shifts the perspective, because we grow up with the notion that symptoms are to be blocked, cut out, somehow got rid of, instead of listened to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you've got to go and live off in endless bouts and hours of pain. It means, listen, where's it coming from? What does it have? One of my mentors, very, very important person in my life, he said to me some years ago, Kim, never forget, pain points the finger to the unlearned lesson.
Interesting. Yeah.
I remember that landed for me. It served me so well in my own life.
But even as you said a couple of minutes ago about the womb being such a sacred organ and the giver of life, and so therefore, I know it's been, I say it in my book about how somebody called it the wandering womb, when some of the internal lining of the endometriosis migrates and finds itself in the abdominal cavity. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, it's why, for example, did your mum, who's one of 4 sisters, how come she got it and others didn't? And my mum was always the one that was trying to get away. She always used to say, I was the one that got away. And it's interesting when you're trying to sort of think, why is that tissue displaced, even just from a kind of physiological, biological perspective, but then add, these wider concepts or questions behind it. Why, And
what did it mean to her? So I think we shared the story the other day about another one of a patient that I have worked with who, was told, I'm allowed to employ you and to pay you, but I'm not allowed to pay you the same because you've got a womb.
It's just awful, isn't it?
And that on the background of, if you've done really well as a woman, you must have done something nefarious, slept with the professor or whatever.
Yeah.
Creates a negative relationship with it. And that doesn't happen only from men.
No.
I've got another client, who the way in which she entered puberty and how her mother dealt with her. I mean, these are deep things. And then you start to think, what is this thing? I don't want it.
Of course.
I've a very mixed relationship with it.
You start to reject your own body, your own sense of self, don't you? I think your paper, the very first quote about Mother Teresa. Can you remember that quote? You said something about leprosy and diseases aren't going to be the number one issue.
Number one is depression.
Depression because of isolation and loneliness and mistreatment. I mean, it isn't talked. I talk a lot, my podcasts are a lot about emotional health and emotional empowerment and enabling women to recognize that actually, some of the treatment they've had, is not their fault. It's not a reflection of them. It's not here to apportion blame or do parent shaming, but, you just have to go back. The war was only 80 years ago, and people came back from the wars, women had to go up to the factories, there was all sorts of trauma. And, what did people do with all of that? They suppressed it, didn't they? And that's probably been passed down the line. But what I say to women is, like, you weren't supposed to, it isn't okay that you were treated like that. It isn't okay that you could be in a family and feel abjectly lost, alone and abandoned and mistreated. And again, a lot of that can be suppressed and shoved down because you want to be invisible. You don't want to be here. Like that woman doesn't want to be a woman because she's being treated differently. And if we don't have a culture of, in fact, I got interviewed yesterday as I was sharing with you for a paper, and she's saying, so why didn't you speak to your mother about it? And why didn't you speak to your friends about it? I said, I didn't speak to anyone about it. I was ashamed. I was humiliated. I was mortified. I wanted to disappear. Why didn't I speak to anyone? There wasn't the culture then to speak about it, and I think it's only now people are starting to be more comfortable with talking about emotional mistreatment or emotional abuse and how that manifests itself in the body from disease or disharmony. And I don't think people have been aware. And I say, not to go around blaming everyone, but just, it might not be a justification, but it's an explanation is what I'm trying to say. I think if people can understand the explanation for certain types of treatment, then it allows them to take back responsibility for themselves and say, right, what am I responsible for? I can't change other people, but I can sort of come back to myself and recognize my own power.
Absolutely. That's a journey. I mean, that is a massive and hugely significant moment in any human being's life, because of course this is as true for men as it is for women.
Of course.
And that's why I think your book is as important to men as it will be obviously for women. But I wanted really to also to share something else. We are speaking, and you and I have a love for and facility with the metaphysical. Meanings matter, and for me, it's the beginning and the end of everything.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, whatever one espouses in terms of the creation of life, whether we espouse the notion of the Big Bang, which I think is insane anyway, or the fact that actually we live in an existence that has no beginning and no end, which is, you know, quite a challenge for the human mind. We nevertheless come back to the fact that we are in a body.
Yeah.
And the body is a vehicle for this thing called life. And this thing called life in this body this human has an individuality. Now, this body, which we can think of as a car, also needs certain things for its maintenance. So don't just think that I or you or anybody else in this world in which we work is saying it's all in the mind.
Absolutely
There
not.
is work to be done with diet and with nutrition and with movement and with exercise and with breath and with meditation and journal and thinking and exploration. That is as fundamental to the healing as the rest. But my experience has been that all of those things and whatever other interventions we do will take us so far.
Yeah.
But the real effulgence of life happens when the other comes. And that I know was your experience and absolutely has been mine.
Yeah.
And I feel that is so important, but I want to come back to the fact that when you can start to think, and if people take nothing else away from this conversation, it is that disease is a manifestation of health. It doesn't matter what the condition is. I've been ridiculed. I've had incredible stuff thrown at me when I have said this. How does that explain genetic disease? How does that explain congenital issues? How does that explain Down syndrome, cancer, death, whatever?
Yeah.
The point of and I know it for a fact, that when you really follow that, you really ask the question, it brings you inevitably to what is life? What is its meaning?
Yeah.
That journey is unique to each person. But when they take it, if they really take it, and no one has to take it, there's nothing wrong with not taking it.
Absolutely.
They will find, as I found and continue to find, that behind everything, A is meaning, and B, it's feedback, bringing us to an awareness that life has an innate order, that we are here by virtue of it, and most importantly, when that happens, there is an experience of what I call the divine magnificence. And then we see that it doesn't matter what happened. It was in order to get you there, and you feel love and gratitude.
Beautifully said. And were you kicking and screaming along the way at times? I know I was. Like I've joked with you and I joke with my clients. I'm like, I know when I'm about to grow again because I start to resist journaling and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to start growing again. I don't know if I'm quite comfortable in my velvet rod. I've grown enough. I've had enough of growing. And then it's like, no, hold on to your breeks, Wendy, because you're going to be growing again. And of course, it's never as bad as I think. So I think the reason I say that is for the women that are listening and thinking, but I don't know what my meaning is for my life. And I don't know why I'm in pain. I just want to reassure you that you do actually know. It's just that you've not had the confidence or worked with someone to give you the feedback, to reflect back to your instincts and your intuition and your wisdom, because you do know. Your intestinal tract is lined with, what is it, 100 million neurons or whatever the number is. But the fact is, people say, listen to your gut. What are your gut instincts telling you? Because you do know that, but somewhere subconsciously, you may be suppressing it because it feels too fearful to even imagine. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, I'm right, as you know, in the epicenter of it right now. And the next step, as it is emerging, brings into question and into conflict certain ideas and behaviors that I've lived with for a long time, and it's scary.
But you innately know it now, don't you? I think that's why you're at a beautiful point in your journey too, because you've been here before and as part of your journey. Like, that is part of your history, which is of course just not going to disappear. That is part of the foundations of the house you're continuing to build. That
I'm continuing to build, and that is being built in me.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important. And the other thing, yes, there is a facility, but one of the things that I'm keen to share with people is that when it comes, it's always the same. There's always a leap to be taken.
Yeah.
There's always that moment of faith, that act of faith.
It's faith. It is faith. Wow. I say that to my women all the time. It is literally a leap of faith. It is because I used to have a screenshot on my phone of that, going across a ravine, this little person going across a ravine, there's nothing underneath it, and going on faith, going the golden chasel sort of thing. It's just like I was going on, and I had to have it on my phone to remind myself I was going on faith, this blind faith. But there was something bigger.
Exactly. It's blind until we can see it.
Yes.
Everywhere. Because also it requires an inner vision.
Absolutely.
In a sense. And the more we trust that, yes, the more it guides us. But it means, and this is for everybody, listening, struggling, it doesn't matter what it is. It truly, truly, truly doesn't matter what it is. If it is real to you, it is your material. And it will have inherent in it the response. One of the great moments for me, because, when the question is there and this, and one obsesses, it will not leave one alone. Why? Where does this come from? Why? How does it work? And then,
I popped out my mum's womb, which is interesting. I was a breech baby, so I came out legs first, but going, why? I joke about it, but it's true. I'm just like, but why?
Exactly. And then you have that moment, for me anyway, was the moment of, oh my God, it's actually true. Everything comes from nothing. From nothing. We follow it. We've gone to the subatomic particles. We're going to find other subatomic particles, but at its quintessence, there's nothing. And yet it manifests everything. Now, that's where the miracle is born. That's where the miracle is born. Now, not everyone can go there. Not everyone should go there. I don't want anybody to think that is the prerequisite, because when you're wrestling with pain, cramps, feeling like awful, your tummy's hurting, and all of those things, you come back to yourself and listen.
And of course, it almost feels counter. Exactly. And you saying, and no, there's another way, that was always what was going through my head. And when I was bedridden, there has to be another way. There has to be another way. But I think what we're saying as well is, like, it might seem counterintuitive because we've been there ourselves, haven't we? So it's almost counterintuitive. You're fighting what doesn't seem kind of real and tangible. But if you can ask the questions of, especially if you're in a medical maze and a repeated cycle of painkillers, drugs and surgery that are causing more harm to the body. That's the worry. That's the danger, is just to start journaling, start paying attention, start listening, and you'd be surprised, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing what impact and power we have over our body that nobody's ever told us that we had.
That's correct. Which is why when I was asked a few years ago, so what is the legacy you want to leave? What came out of my mouth at that moment was, the legacy I want to leave is that the science of meaning is taught to 5-year-olds in schools all over the world. Yeah. It's the most powerful tool we can have.
Yeah.
And the science of meaning is a vehicle that allows us to get in touch with the power of language. Mm. And language can take many forms. So we always think about it as words and sound, but it's just the same in sign language. It's just the same in feelings. Mm. How do we listen? Where is it leading us? 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 It leads us all the way back home to source.
Yeah.
And then it's born and it starts again.
Mm. And I think that it's beautiful what you said there about emotions as well, because I think our emotions can really give us a lot of feedback. You know, we've got the biofeedback and the neurofeedback and the emotional feedback and when we do start to listen, the idea of listening, I know for me, at the beginning felt overwhelming, and that's where I always encourage, and all my listeners will know, I think we joked about this at the beginning, I'm going to have on my tombstone, Wendy, the journal queen, or journal, because it's a way to really allow the questions and your own intuitive answers to come up about your body. And every single woman that I work with does know what is at the root of their pain and inflammation, hormonal imbalance. And yes, it is a multimodal approach. We're not just saying it's one size fits all. It is the produce, it is the products, it is the property pass and people, but there's a mishmash in there. And that's why it is such a complex condition. And I'm so glad that you've been here today to kind of provide a wider context, because I know that you will inspire women. Hopefully you've just gone with their brains as they go, oh my goodness. And because you're such an eminent doctor who is so well educated and versed of all spectrums of what it means to be a human in the physical, emotional and spiritual form. And that's very, very rare. So I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's a privilege, Wendy. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Kim. In fact, before you go, would you want to let people know how they can get more information about you? I'll have it in the podcast, but share with people how they can get more information on you.
Well, the current website is functionalshift.com. You'll find me there. You'll find me on Facebook, for at least at the moment. You'll find me on LinkedIn, those sorts of things. And they'll find me through you if they want to.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to maybe be looking at doing something together in the future as well, which I think will be amazing, because I think there's so much wisdom that you have that women's inner instincts need to know, because unfortunately, there's some doctors out there that don't have women's interest.
Wendy, there's one thing, just one final thing I want just burning to say.
Okay.
The question that people ask is why? And one of the things that has helped a lot, whether it's endometriosis or cancer, remember, it's your body, they're your cells, and it's your womb. So it's your process. And if your body and your cells and your process can create that, it is equally possible for it to uncreate that.
Absolutely.
And what you and I do is work the reverse process, which is just as valid as the forward process. And the forward process is to wake you up to the other so that you can do something else in your life.
And I love how you said that, because our process is helping women get back to themselves, back to the core, back to the essence, back to the spirit and the soul of who they are at their core, that for whatever reason they've never connected with, or been ashamed to connect with, or have lost at some point in time. And that's really what the work is that we do, isn't it?
It is. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. And as I say, if you want to hear more from Dr. Kim Jobst, he will be on our summit, and he's got some fantastic stories as well. So make sure to look out for that. But in the meantime, Kim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
See you soon.
Hey, it's Wendy here again. I hope you really enjoyed listening to Dr. Kim talk about metaphysics and biology and medicine and psychology and emotions, and bring all those mystery elements together in one fell swoop. People like Dr. Kim are people that I have sought out in the latter part of my life to connect with, because they understand the whole dimension of what it means to be a human, and especially when you're healing from a condition like endometriosis. And of course, this is very much what the work is that I do, and is very much based on why I get the success that I do with women who've had endometriosis for 10, 20, 30, and even 40 years. But if you want to hear more from Dr. Kim, I am running for you a free Ultimate Emotional Health Summit that starts in Monday, the 12th of April, for 3 days. I've spent a lot of time interviewing some fantastic people that I thought would inspire you at this particular time. There's a lot of, negative news and a lot of negative narrative, and it's at these kind of times that we need inspiration more than at any other point. So as I say, I've interviewed 14 of the most amazing speakers, and my gift to you is to let you listen to that for free. All you have to do is register and make sure that you turn up on the days that they're going to be scheduled. There's going to be like 4 to 5 speakers a day, and you're going to get a 12-hour period to listen to them for free. But what I'm also going to do is try and incentivize you to go into a 21-day challenge. And the speakers have very generously donated up to almost £3,000 worth of prizes and bonuses if you join the 21-day challenge, because I've just finished a 21-day challenge recently, and the transformations and shifts and movement with women have been phenomenal. So this is my gift to you, is I want to be able to again encourage you, incentivize you into taking some form of action if you've maybe sat on the sidelines before. Now, if you register for the summit, as I say, you can watch it for free, but you can also get the 21-day challenge, lifetime access to the speakers, and these bonuses for only £37, which is an early bird price if you are interested. So I really hope that you'll go along and check out the page. It's ultimateemotionalhealth.com/summit 2021. So go along, have a look. I'll put details in down below. But if you want to hear more from Dr. Kim, some other doctors that I've been interviewing that are just groundbreaking in their approaches to healing their clients and approaching it as a whole body, whole person, as well as some other amazing speakers who are doing great things for people out there in the world, then make sure to register as soon as possible, as spaces are limited. But anyway, until then, remember to keep you number one, and I'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number one. The world needs a healthy you.